A humanitarian catastrophe tonight in Brazil. The pandemic raging out of control, and tonight, the blame being laid squarely on the Brazilian government. Street vendors struggle.
How has this little community, I guess, evolved during this pandemic?
Everybody needs something. There's no job. They got to survive.
As our lives inch closer to normal, a community that bore the brunt of this pandemic, fighting for their lives and their livelihoods. The snowboarders embracing the unknown and defying gravity will take you on one exhilarating, heart-pounding thrill ride. And good evening, I'm Juju Chang, in tonight for Lindsay Davis. Thank you for streaming with us. And it has happened again. Another week in America, another mass shooting. Indianapolis, Indiana, joining Boulder, Colorado, and Atlanta, Georgia. Cities now grieving after hate entered their communities. Shortly after 11 p.m. Thursday night, a former employee at FedEx drove up to the second largest FedEx facility in the world and opened fire. Roughly 120 seconds later, at least a dozen people had been shot. Here's what we know right now. At least 8 people are dead and at least 5 injured. Families of FedEx employees have spent much of today waiting while authorities comb through the crime scene, beginning the heartbreaking process of identifying victims and notifying loved ones. The shooter himself killed himself before police arrived. He was later identified as 19-year-old Brandon Scott Hole. And tonight we are learning his own mom called police more than a year ago to warn them he could be a danger. Our Victor Akendo leads us off from Indianapolis.
Tonight, new details into that deadly shooting at an Indianapolis FedEx facility as we learn a former employee armed with a rifle allegedly opened fire.
They have an active shooter currently at FedEx.
Just after 11 p.m. Thursday, officers responding to reports of shots fired at this operations center, FedEx's second largest hub in the world, roughly 100 workers present at the time.
We heard 3 more shots. And then my buddy Levi saw someone running out of the building.
Police finding 8 killed, 4 outside the building and 4 inside. At least 5 others rushed to the hospital with gunshot wounds. Their identities not yet released.
Nobody should die by that. We're here to get a paycheck, but then we can keep on living.
Today, police identifying the suspect, 19-year-old Brandon Scott Hole. FedEx says he was a former employee at that facility, but police still don't have a motive.
Do you know if the suspect had any relationship with anyone inside the FedEx facility? Girlfriend, family member, anything?
No, we don't have any information indicating that right now.
Authorities say he drove to the facility, got out, and started shooting randomly, making his way into the building. The massacre taking just 1 to 2 minutes. Police say he killed himself before officers arrived. Overnight, families gathering at a nearby hotel, anxiously waiting for word on their loved ones. This father emotional when he learned his son was safe today.
He was in the other building when it happened. I'm so thankful.
FedEx policy does not allow some workers to have phones during their shifts. Many were frustrated this left them unable to let family know they were okay.
They don't know if their loved ones are alive or hurt or anything because they can't take their phones in there.
Today, in a statement, FedEx saying in part, the safety of our team members is our top priority, and we are fully cooperating with investigating authorities. Since the deadly shootings at Atlanta area spas in March that left 8 dead, there have been at least 51 mass shootings in the U.S. Mass shootings defined as having a minimum of 4 victims shot or killed, not including the shooter. President Biden ordering all U.S. flags to half staff after the Indianapolis shooting, saying too many Americans are dying every single day from gun violence. It stains our character and pierces the very soul of our nation. We can and must do more to act and to save lives.
And Victor Akendo joins us now from Indianapolis. Tonight we're learning the suspect's mother had called police about her own son last year.
Juju, this comes from the FBI. They're assisting local police in the case. They say that the suspect's mom reported he might try to commit suicide by cop. He was questioned by police. They removed a shotgun from his house and say that that gun was not returned to him. Juju?
So much to investigate. Thank you so much, Victor Akendo. And now to Chicago, where the city is bracing for demonstrations over the police shooting death of 13-year-old Adam Toledo, shown in body camera video as he was shot with his hands in the air. And now new video emerging showing Toledo and the man he was with before that encounter with police. ABC's Alex Perez has the latest from Chicago.
Tonight, newly released video showing 13-year-old Adam Toledo and 21-year-old Ruben Roman Jr. walking through this Chicago neighborhood about 2:30 in the morning. Surveillance capturing several rounds of gunfire. The pair then seen running away as police respond. In the police body cam video, you can see Officer Eric Stillman chasing the two suspects, pushing one to the ground, running after the other. The officer yelling to see the suspect's hands. Toledo's right hand momentarily out of view as the boy pivots, turns around, and raises both hands.
Show me your hand. Stop it. Stop it.
Officer Stillman fires a single shot. Toledo's hands appear to be empty when he was struck. A freeze-frame image shows Toledo holding what appears to be a gun in that right hand. Authorities say it was less than 1 second from when the weapon seems to disappear and when the boy is shot in the chest. This nearby security camera capturing the heart-racing moments before the shooting. The 13-year-old allegedly tossing the handgun behind this wooden fence where it was recovered by police. The firearm seen on the officer's body cam. Stillman, immediately after the shooting, calling for an ambulance and beginning CPR. Appearing to be emotional, later sitting on the ground, another officer consoling him.
I'm Officer Stillman from the Chicago Police Department.
Stillman, seen here in a video for a toy giveaway, joined the force in 2015. He has 3 complaints and 4 use of force reports on his record, but has never been disciplined. The police union lawyer representing Stillman defending his actions, saying he was, quote, left with no other option. But the Toledo family attorney says the video speaks for itself.
If you're shooting an unarmed child with his hands in the air, it is an assassination.
Demonstrators taking to the streets Thursday demanding justice.
And Alex Perez joins me now from Chicago. Alex, more demonstrations are planned for tonight, but what's the message from the Toledo family?
Yeah, Juju, there's demonstrations tonight, and city officials are bracing for possibly more demonstrations through the weekend. In a statement, the 13-year-old's family is imploring people to remain peaceful and, most importantly, they say to remain non-violent. Juju?
And Alex, you're in Chicago, but you've also been covering the Derek Chauvin trial in Minnesota for the past 2 weeks, where we also saw the shooting death of Daunte Wright. Give us the big picture here. How are these events on top of each other being felt in the Minneapolis area, and could it potentially impact the jury in the Chauvin trial?
Yeah, Juju, it's not just Minneapolis. It's essentially across the country. People are talking about all of these shootings. And I think the one thing we've seen the last several weeks is that in the past, before, possibly some people felt it was something that happened in someone else's neighborhood. But because of all the attention these shootings are getting the last few weeks and last several months, I think it's something that everyone is thinking about in Minneapolis. Of course, the air seems tense there as everyone awaits a possible verdict in that case sometime next week. The jury could begin deliberating by Monday afternoon. Now, part of their instructions involve not watching the news, not following what's happening with that case. So they're not supposed to be watching the news, Juju, but of course everybody believes that this is all such an important thing, what's happening and affecting so many people, that it's on the minds of everyone, no matter what's going on. Juju?
Alex, so much to consider. Thanks so much, Alex Perez. It's a race against COVID as more and more Americans continue to get vaccinated. Over half of the country is seeing an uptick in deaths. As experts warn, now is not the time to let our guards down. Not yet. Whit Johnson brings us this report.
Tonight, even as the U.S. reaches that new milestone, 200 million shots into arms.
Just go ahead and relax. you go, just like that.
The pandemic still raging. Deaths climbing in 27 states, more than half the country. The CDC blaming relaxed mask mandates, indoor dining, and those highly contagious variants.
More than 50 to 70% more transmissible, which makes the race to stop the transmission even more challenging and threatens to overwhelm our healthcare system again in parts of this country.
More than 73,000 new cases reported in just 24 hours. Michigan now ground zero, hospitals hitting capacity.
You could barely get around the hallways. There were so many people, almost every inch of every hallway, and the emergency departments were full with different stretchers. To me, that was very much like a war zone.
55-year-old John English wasn't able to get the vaccine before he got COVID. He's now hospitalized with a blood clot.
They're giving me medication to break up the blood clot, but my oxygen level keeps on fluctuating enough where I can't stabilize enough to go home yet.
More than 30% of American adults have been fully vaccinated, but the Johnson & Johnson vaccine still on hold as health experts investigate rare blood clots in at least 6 women. The head of the CDC panel that will make a recommendation cautioning the pause could last weeks.
Is it possible that the extended pause could do more harm than good?
There is always that consideration. We want this to be a pause long enough to get the answer, to come to a conclusion that is reasonably scientifically based, but not long enough so that we can erode confidence in this vaccine.
And Whit Johnson joins us now. Whit, we know there's another emergency meeting planned for next Friday on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that's been paused. But as you noted, the head of the CDC panel says he doesn't expect a decision by then. Why the wait?
Juju, 3 million people were vaccinated within 3 weeks of that pause on the J&J vaccine, and that's the window in which these troubling symptoms can occur. Dr. Ramiro tells me it is crucial that they wait to see if there are any more cases so they can properly analyze the benefits and the risks. Juju.
Whit Johnson, thank you. And we continue to follow the unfortunate and deadly impact COVID is having on the country of Brazil, where the death toll there continues to climb as hospitals run out of supplies. And the situation there doesn't appear to have an end in sight. ABC's Matt Gutman brings us the latest.
Tonight in Brazil, those sprawling field hospitals capturing the country's growing COVID emergency. Death sweeping the country, more people now dying there of COVID than anywhere else in the world. More than 3,000 a day.
The failed response in Brazil has caused a humanitarian catastrophe.
Hundreds of hospitals are short or out of sedatives critical for intubation. And now that image, a patient's hand secured to his hospital bed, Brazilian news outlets reporting that staff are forced to take extreme measures, having to restrain more patients than they typically would. They fear unsupervised patients might rip out those tubes if they regain consciousness because of a lack of sedatives and inadequate number of staff to monitor them. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro initially shunning both masks and social distancing. Then he got COVID himself. And recently, with the death toll in his country rising, Bolsonaro telling Brazilians to stop whining.
And Matt Gutman joins us now. Matt, in your piece, you mentioned the impact of COVID on the Brazilian economy, but wasn't part of the reason President Bolsonaro refused to issue a lockdown was precisely because he wanted to prevent this kind of economic fallout?
Juju, this is basically the law of unintended consequences, right? So the president of Brazil did try to keep the economy open as long enough to preserve it, but that backfired, as we are seeing now. And it's one reason why officials, both the United States and in Brazil, health officials have been saying throughout, just follow the science, do the right thing, mask up, social distance, vaccinate. But that's not what Brazil did. And that's one of the reasons the scientists say it finds itself in such a terrible situation right now. Juju.
Thank you, Matt Gutman. And now to the economy back here at home and another record week on Wall Street. The Dow Jones closing today at another record high at 34,200, and the S&P 500 also hit another record mark, the 4th straight week of gains. Let's bring in ABC News economic correspondent Deirdre Bolton to discuss what's behind the rise. Deirdre, hey, in the past year, many have commented on how the stock market is detached from Main Street and the real economy. So how important are these stock market records, and what do they tell you about the state of the economy right now?
Juju, the stock market is important. It's an indicator. I agree that it is not the exact barometer for every single mainstream business, but one of the reasons why we are seeing stocks at record highs is because corporate America is beginning to show us all, investors, its report cards. We've had a lot of banks, for example, post earnings this week much better than expected, and so that's one of the reasons why we are seeing the stock market at these record highs. But you asked quite rightly about the economy, which is a separate entity. And another reason why the stocks are so high is because the economy is really going on all cylinders. We have had such a tough 12 months, and it seems like now we are finally turning the page. So we got some data this week that was really encouraging, showing that Americans are out and about. They are spending in all kinds of businesses. Most economists saying the fact that the vaccine sites opening up, more and more people getting vaccinated means that more and more businesses are being able to open, and that is also helping the job market. So even statistically, we had a data point this week, Juju, which showed the fewest number of Americans applying for unemployment benefits for the first time in 13 months. So all the way back to March 2020. So that is a really encouraging sign. The caveat, of course, is that more than 16 million Americans are still looking for work. I don't want to downplay that. I'm just trying to show statistically that we are making a positive pivot in the right direction. So for all of these reasons, we are seeing that reflected in these stock market highs, Juju.
Yeah, those unemployment numbers really say a lot. That stands out. And yet the consumer spending that you alluded to seems to be driven by those stimulus checks.
A huge hope, a huge help, exactly as intended. So it's actually wonderful to see. I can tell you the government tracks what we spend collectively in 13 different categories month to month. And for the first time in a very long time, all 13 of these categories for March, we were actually spending more in all of them. I want to tell you about two standout stats that at least I thought were particularly reassuring. So one is in retail sales and apparel. I mean, this was so crushed during the pandemic economy, up 18%, actually a little bit stronger than 18% in March. And also restaurant spending, another area that was so crushed in the past 12 months. Americans spent more than 13% month on month for the month of March. These are the strongest advances for both of these categories since last June. So what we can say is the recovery is here. Now, to what extent that continues is a larger question. But for the moment, I think most economists will tell you we have turned the page from the worst, Juju.
So there's retail sales and spending, and yet there's also a surge in investing in the past year. What's driving that, and where are people putting their money?
Well, this is interesting because as we are talking about these amazing stock market gains and hitting new highs, there is also investor attention going into alternative assets. So we've been seeing a lot of, for example, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin. We had Coinbase go public this week. So there is some concern, I think, among investors who just traditionally invest in stocks and in bonds, saying, wow, okay, this is amazing that the market is hitting these new highs, but at what point does it become overstretched? At what point does it become, people call it a bubble or frothy, whatever the terminology is. So they're looking for new places to put their money. So we are seeing some of these alternative assets be bid up as well, Juju.
As long as the bubble doesn't burst. Thank you for your time, Deirdre. Appreciate your insights.
Thank you.
And when we come back, a first in the investigations into the January 6th Capitol insurrection. We'll explain. The desperate pleas for help from a group often overlooked, despite the fact so many interact with them daily. The economic relief some street vendors are asking for. And up next, the new details about tomorrow's funeral service for Prince Philip as Britain prepares to say goodbye. Stay with us.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir.
We have made it through another week together.
America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march.
Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads. It's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Somewhere out in the country, there's a man.
I'm Bobby.
Doing good things for good people. He'll walk a mile in their shoes, then get him a brand spanking new pair when he's done.
Just wanted you to have this.
Thank you.
You name it, he'll try. Even if it breaks him.
Bobby Bones, they're trying to break you.
Oh, great.
Breaking Bobby Bones. New series Monday, May 31st at 10 on National Geographic.
I never thought my husband was a diabolical murderer.
The betrayal was just unimaginable.
Is the man still in your house? Yes, he's laying there on the floor with a bullet in his head. Did you shoot him? Yes, I shot him. He was killing my wife.
It all fit pretty good. In fact, almost too good.
There's one more huge twist.
The all-new 2020 event special tonight at 9/8 Central on ABC.
This is Ginger Z, and if you love the Oscars, or if you're just curious about all that hype, well, then you're gonna love this. Inside the Oscars, the podcast, counting down to Hollywood's biggest night. Listen now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
Tonight, the first guilty plea in the January 6th Capitol siege. John Schaefer, a self-described oath keeper, pled guilty to multiple felonies. Prosecutors say he breached the Capitol and was wearing a tactical vest armed with bear spray. Schaefer says he will now fully cooperate with the government. He faces up to 50 months in prison and a $150,000 fine. Tomorrow, Queen Elizabeth will say farewell to her husband of more than 70 years, Prince Philip. Of course, due to COVID restrictions, the service is expected to be much smaller than the ones we've seen in the past. ABC's James Longman has the latest details on the funeral from London.
A nation and a queen prepares to say goodbye. Tonight, the palace releasing this never-before-seen picture of Queen Elizabeth and her prince, the Duke of Edinburgh. And we're learning more about tomorrow's funeral. The Queen will pause in her car for a moment of reflection as she passes the coffin of her beloved husband. Prince Charles, Princess Anne and grandsons will follow the casket in procession. It's an image sure to evoke memories of Princess Diana's funeral when Philip supported Princes William and Harry through their grief. But the brothers will not walk together. Between them, a cousin, Peter Phillips. The Queen will sit alone in St George's Chapel. The 30 in attendance, including Her Majesty, will wear masks. Unusually, all royals will be in civilian dress, perhaps to include Prince Harry, who stepped down from royal duties and was stripped of his military titles. But the ceremony and music will celebrate Philip's deep devotion to the military, Queen and country.
And James Longman joins us now. James, give us the British sensibility, if you will, on just how much Prince Philip meant to the people of Britain.
Well, Gigi, I think it's pretty mixed. I think first and foremost, people are getting to know Prince Philip this week. I think to a lot of people my age, a lot of people younger than me, see him as kind of an old man, a stiff upper lip, you know, the kind of epitome of the sort of British establishment. But actually, we're seeing him in his younger days, and it's been wonderful to learn about it, particularly his military career. He was a war hero. He fought valiantly in the Mediterranean during the Second World War, and we're going to see that tomorrow represented in tributes by the military. They're all going to be represented here. The Royal Marines, we're going to have a military band. You'll see his naval cap placed on his casket. We'll see his personal flag draped over his casket with his Danish and English royal insignia. So we're just going to see and feel the richness that was his life tomorrow, and we've certainly felt it for the last week here in Britain. Over and above that, of course, I think what he means is it's the loss to the Queen. That's what people feel here. He is this man who's spent 73 years by the Queen,
Queen's side. And we've seen her speak about how he was her rock, her strength, her stay. These are not words that the monarch uses lightly. And I think that's what people are really feeling this week, sadness for her. We'll see her tomorrow, masked, alone. But we're not meant to feel sad in that image, Juju. We're meant to feel that she's carrying on, getting on with it as Prince Philip would have wanted. And finally, I think it's what Philip represented. It's his generation. It's everything that they mean, good and bad. Everything that it meant to be kind of an English gentleman, putting yourself behind others. He was a humble individual. Yes, he liked to share his opinions, but never about himself. And I think in this age of celebrity, what a wonderful lesson that is. Juju?
A lot about duty and service. James Longman, thank you. And joining us now is ABC News Royal contributor Victoria Morphy. Victoria, thanks for joining us.
Hi there.
Well, we know that because of the pandemic, there are strict limits on the number of people who can attend the funeral. And the royal family is very much adhering to those rules, which means only 30 mourners will be attending the funeral. And where will they be seated?
That's right. I mean, the royal family have been, of course, really keen to stick to the COVID guidelines that everyone else is currently being asked to follow. So we've been told the Queen has had some really difficult decisions to make. She's had to do the final sign-off on all of this, and they have chosen 30 family members. There's only one non-family member in attendance, Prince Philip's very close friend, the Countess Mountbatten of Burma. Everyone else is in the family, close family members, immediate family, and some of their spouses. And significantly as well, space has been made for 3 of Prince Philip's relatives to reflect the German side of his family. His 4 sisters married into the German aristocracy, and clearly that was something that was very important to him, so they are being represented at the funeral in just this small number of people. And we're going to see social distancing in place, so we're going to see people sitting, unless they are in the same household, 2 meters apart inside the chapel, and of course wearing face masks as well.
That's interesting, because I had read that they had not been, the German side of the family had not been present at his wedding so many years ago. We also know that there's going to be a ceremonial procession behind Prince Philip's casket on the route to the chapel for the service, as well as a short walk back afterwards. Now, Prince William and Prince Harry are notably not near each other in any of these plans. Is that surprising to you?
Well, I think it's very interesting, and it was very apparent to me when they made that known that that was going to attract a lot of attention, because obviously we know about the huge disagreements that there have been, and there was a lot of anticipation that these brothers would be walking side by side. But when they announced the plan, actually there is one lineup of 3, and their cousin Peter Phillips is going in between them. Now, you can look at it and say it makes sense. There had to be a lineup of 3 somewhere, and there's 3 grandsons walking, so it makes sense for them to go together. But when they go into the chapel and they go into 2s, Harry and William are not walking side by side then. There's a way to explain it, but it's really hard not to read into it as a sign that this rift, is very significant, and we're going to see them very separate on the day. Another example of the significant disputes that we know have existed.
Absolutely serves as metaphor in a way. Just a few hours ago, too, Buckingham Palace released the order of actual funeral service. On paper, it seems rather short. What can you tell us about the service, and why is it being done this way?
Yeah, so it's actually going to be, we were told, around 50 minutes, and they have released the order. It's a very straightforward service, I would say. There's no eulogies. It's a very religious service. Apparently, Philip's faith was very important to him. It's the people speaking are the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Dean of Windsor. We've got this choir of 4 people who are going to be singing, but no one in the congregation can sing, because that's obviously in line with COVID rules. So it's a very kind of straightforward service, but there are a couple of personal touches. One of them is that he has asked for the Royal Marines, the bugles of the Royal Marines, to play something called action stations at some one point in the service, which was something that was played in the Royal Navy, which obviously he served in the Royal Navy, to ask people to make a call for battle. And so, that's really reflective of the years of service that he put into the Royal Navy.
And finally, Victoria, we know that Her Majesty the Queen and other senior royals have carried out some engagements this week during the official mourning period for Prince Philip. That might seem a bit unusual, it seems, especially for the Queen, who's just lost her husband.
I know, but I think it does, exemplify this attitude that they have, which is, as Prince William said, Philip would want them to get on with the job. They are in a 2-week mourning period, and we were told that they would carry out engagements that are appropriate to that. So we have seen them pull back from attending certain things, but they have appeared in public to look at the flowers, and the Queen has had an audience with a member of staff. So they are doing some things that are considered appropriate, and I guess it falls into that category of duty service first.
Yes, service after a lifetime of service. Thank you so much, Victoria Murphy, for your insights and for your time.
Thank you so much.
And still ahead on Prime, you ever get one of those calls about new service warranties on a car, but you don't have one? Or some other robocall that you know is a sham? It's getting out of control, but what can we do about it? History in Cuba. For the first time since 1959, there will be not a Castro ruling the party. So what's next for this communist island nation? And the stunning growth of the Chinese economy. We take a look by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day, remembering an icon. Selena would have turned 50 today.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough. You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
This is Ginger Z, and if you love the Oscars, or if you're just curious about all that hype, well, then you're gonna love this. Inside the Oscars, the podcast, counting down to Hollywood's biggest night. Listen now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
The road to Oscar goes through GMA. The anticipation, the nominees, including this nominated grandmother who stole the show in Britain. What will Hollywood's biggest night look like this year? And the fashion? Next week, get your Oscar on with ABC's Good Morning America. 24 hours. Assault on the Capitol. The ABC News original. Exclusively on Hulu. Now streaming.
Somewhere out in the country, there's a man.
I'm Bobby.
Doing good things for good people. He'll walk a mile in their shoes, then get them a brand spanking new pair when he's done.
Just wanted you to have this.
Thank you.
You name it, he'll try. Even if it breaks him.
Bobby Bones, they're trying to break you.
Oh, great.
Breaking Bobby Bones. New series Monday, May 31st at 10 on National Geographic.
I never thought my husband was a diabolical murderer.
The betrayal was just unimaginable.
Is the man still in your house?
Yes, he's laying there with a bullet in his head.
Did you shoot him?
Yes, I shot him. He was killing my wife.
It all fit pretty good. In fact, almost too good.
There's one more huge twist.
The all-new 2020 event special tonight at 9/8 Central on ABC. With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir.
We have made it through another week together.
America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
We turn now to China, the original epicenter of COVID-19 and the first major economy to rebound from the pandemic. It's seen explosive growth over the past year, but now that recovery could be slowing down. We take a closer look by the numbers. A staggering 18.3%. That's how much China's economy grew in the first quarter of 2021 compared to the same period a year ago, according to official Chinese data released today. It's China's highest growth on record. China's GDP grew 2.3% in 2020, making it the only major economy in the world to expand during that pandemic-plagued year. After extreme lockdowns in the early days of COVID-19, China roared back to life. Retail spending rose 34% in March. And Chinese exports surged nearly 31% compared to last year amid increased global demand. But in a sign that China's COVID-19 rebound is now slowing, China's most recent quarter-over-quarter GDP growth was a meager 0.6%. Experts say that China's post-pandemic economic recovery has been impressive, but also bumpy and uneven, and it's far from clear how much China's economy will continue to grow in the coming months. And we still have a ton to get here tonight on Prime. President Biden facing backlash from his own party after he backtracks on a campaign pledge. The spring snowstorm that nobody wanted hitting parts of the Northeast. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
We move up to the vehicle. He detonates a bomb.
The heroes who stopped the killer, who held the city of Austin hostage for 19 days.
It's a tripwire. All hands on deck.
The clues, the Home Depot video, that truck, and the agent who connected the dots.
It was exactly the vehicle that we were looking for.
Inside the investigation,
Vans made contact.
the takedown of the bomber. Now streaming on Hulu.
Somewhere out in the country, there's a man.
I'm Bobby.
Doing good things for good people. He'll walk a mile in their shoes, then get him a brand spanking new pair when he's done.
Just wanted you to have this.
Thank you.
You name it, he'll try. Even if it breaks him.
Bobby Bones, they're trying to break you.
Oh, great.
Breaking Bobby Bones. New series Monday, May 31st at 10 on National Geographic.
I never thought my husband was a diabolical murderer.
The betrayal was just unimagiable.
Is the man still in your house?
Yes, he's laying there with a bullet in his head.
Did you shoot him?
Yes, I shot him. He was killing my wife.
It all fit pretty good. In fact, almost too good.
There's one more huge twist.
The all-new 2020 event special tonight at 9/8 Central on ABC. The road to Oscar goes through GMA. The anticipation, the nominees, including this nominated grandmother who stole the show in Britain. What will Hollywood's biggest night look like this year? And the fashion? Next week, get your Oscar on with ABC's Good Morning America.
This is Ginger Z, and if you love the Oscars, or if you're just curious about all that hype, well, then you're gonna love this. Inside the Oscars, the podcast, counting down to Hollywood's biggest night. Listen now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
This is GMA3, what you need to know. GMA3.
A third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon.
It's all about you. Lunchtime on ABC.
Last night was a devastating blow, and its impact will be felt by our community for days and weeks to come.
An emotional scene in Indianapolis as survivors of a shooting at a massive FedEx facility near the city's main airport reunited with family and friends. At least 8 people are dead. Several others are injured. Police say the gunman apparently died by suicide shortly before police entered the building.
They have an active shooter currently at FedEx.
We heard 3 more shots, and then my buddy Levi saw someone running out of the building.
Today, police identifying the suspect, 19-year-old Brandon Scott Hole. FedEx says he was a former employee at that facility, but police still don't have a motive.
Do you know if the suspect had any relationship with anyone inside the FedEx facility? Girlfriend, family member, anything?
No, we don't have any information indicating that right now.
Today, police searched the gunman's home, looking for clues into a motive.
Authorities say he drove to the facility, got out, and started shooting randomly, making his way into the building. The massacre taking just 1 to 2 minutes. Police say he killed himself before officers arrived.
Nobody should die by that. We're here to get a paycheck, but then we can keep on living.
Simon & Schuster abruptly pulling out of a book deal with a police officer who was wounded during that deadly raid that killed Breonna Taylor. Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly was shot during the narcotics raid on Taylor's apartment last year in Louisville, Kentucky. His book, called The Fight for the Truth, the inside story behind the Breonna Taylor tragedy, is set to be released in July. The Post-Hill Press will still plan to release the book without Simon & Schuster as the distributor.
This doesn't look like April showers. Parts of the Northeast treated to a snowstorm, resembling scenes typical in February.
5, 6, 7 pounds. I got to go all the way down to here to lift up.
Up to 10 inches of snow falling from upstate New York to Maine. Fitchburg, Massachusetts, blanketed by snow. Heavy snow downing trees and power lines in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Drivers also facing slippery road conditions for the commute home. And snow at Fenway postponing tonight's Red Sox game.
Google Earth taking users on a new journey through climate change using millions of satellite images.
The tool was unveiled Thursday, billed as the biggest update to Google Earth in 5 years. The video feature draws upon nearly 4 decades of satellite imagery to vividly illustrate how climate change has affected glaciers, beaches, forests, and other places around the world. Google says they worked in concert with several government agencies, including NASA and its European counterpart, to put the project together. One climate scientist previewed the video and believes this will get people to understand the scope of climate change and could change many people's minds about the scale of the impact of humans on the environment.
Actress Helen McCrory has died after battling cancer. She was best known for her roles in Peaky Blinders and the Harry Potter movies.
I don't doubt you, Severus.
McCrory's husband, actor Damian Lewis, says his wife died as she lived, fearlessly. Author J.K. Rowling says she's devastated, calling her an extraordinary actress. Helen McCrory was 52. That empty feeling many of us felt scrolling through Instagram? No more. Chrissy Teigen is back. The actress, chef, and clapback queen of Twitter made her triumphant return, saying she missed it. Back in March, Teigen tweeted she was leaving the platform because of all the negativity. She's since returned to her usual tweeting habits, along with a family photo.
There is outrage and some confusion tonight after President Biden appeared to walk back a key promise on allowing more refugees into the United States. The administration deciding not to lift former President Trump's cap on refugees. Then, late this afternoon, making what appears to be yet another shift. ABC senior White House correspondent Mary Bruce has the latest.
Abandoning a key promise, the Biden administration today announced for now it's keeping in place former President Trump's policy, capping the number of refugees allowed to enter the U.S. each year at 15,000, an historically low number. Biden backtracking after he vowed to admit 62,500 refugees.
Come with me around the world and see people piled up in camps, kids dying, no way out. Refugees fleeing from persecution. We, the United States, used to do our part.
The White House today admitting the surge of migrants crossing the Mexican border was a factor in this decision. The pushback, swift and fierce. The International Rescue Committee labeling the move deeply disturbing, noting over 35,000 refugees have already been vetted and cleared for arrival, and over 100,000 are in the pipeline. Late today, under fire, the White House backing down, saying that next month the president will increase the number of refugees admitted. But they concede Biden's promise to admit more than 62,000 is, quote, unlikely.
And Mary Bruce joins me now from Washington. Mary, the White House attempting to do some cleanup on this late today, but there was real outrage from his own party on this decision. So what is their plan going forward?
Well, I have to tell you, Juju, Democrats were furious with this announcement from the White House to keep the Trump administration's cap at 15,000. We were hearing from Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, herself a refugee. She called it shameful that the president was reneging on a key promise. Democratic Senator Dick Durbin, of course, a member of Democratic leadership, sending a very clear message. He called it unacceptable. He said, quote, facing the greatest refugee crisis in our time, there is no reason to limit the number to 15,000. Quote, say it ain't so, President Joe, after seeing these kinds of reactions pour in throughout the afternoon. And of course, a lot of pushback from the international community, from groups that try and help refugees reach the U.S. Then, of course, the White House issuing this statement trying to clarify that the president will, in fact, next month issue a new cap, but also making it very clear that he is not going to meet that promise of allowing in over 62,000 refugees, Juju.
Those are some strong words of protest. Meanwhile, the president's also dealing with tensions with Russia after imposing those tough new sanctions in response to cyber hacking and election interference. And Russia responded today.
Yeah, they retaliated, Russia expelling 10 U.S. diplomats, making it very clear they are not happy with the sanctions that were slapped on them yesterday by the Biden administration. Now, the president, of course, is trying to have it both ways. He's trying to punish Russia here while also working with them going forward. We have heard President Biden say he doesn't want to see an escalation between the U.S. and Russia. In fact, Biden is still optimistic and hoping that he and President Putin will be able to meet face-to-face at a summit later this summer to try and work on areas where they may agree going forward. Juju.
Mary Bruce with the diplomatic tit for tat. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the first time since 1959, Cuba will be led by someone without the last name Castro. 89-year-old Raul Castro has stepped down as head of the Communist Party in that island nation. He took over in 2001 from his brother Fidel, who had been in charge since 1965 when he led the Cuban Revolution. Castro has yet to indicate who he supports to take over for him. Well, as places slowly start to open and Americans return to some version of the hustle and bustle of before, there is one group of small business owners who are ready for the chaos of the fast-paced world: street vendors. Alex Pouchet caught up with some of them, the majority of whom are immigrants, to discuss what the last 13 months have been like for them.
Walk through a row of street vendors. It can quickly tell you just how diverse a neighborhood is.
$4 por $5.
The abuela selling taquitos.
Pechuga de pollo.
The local sharing his cents.
It's nothing like working for yourself. I can say that first and foremost. This is what I love to do.
A painter from the Ivory Coast peddling his artwork.
Sharif, where do you find inspiration?
I love this question. Inspiration is everywhere. I see inspiration in you, Alex. I see inspiration in the cameraman. I see inspiration everywhere.
Hustling to get their hands on the American dream while being a part of the nation's tapestry.
This isn't your typical art gallery.
That's right. Yeah, that's my art gallery because I thought my art is l'art dans la rue avec mes amis. Art on street with my friend. If I put my art in a gallery, the poor people won't see it.
Immigrants' arts, like the work of Sharif Mamadou, come with different colors and backgrounds.
Get the taco.
They all share one theme: survival. Columbia Heights neighborhood of Washington, D.C. is ground zero for the vendor community. It also has one of the highest rates of COVID in the city.
Can you walk me through some of the challenges that it's presented?
The challenges is I can approach people the way I usually approach people.
And here in D.C., the coronavirus infection rates among Latinos are far outpacing the overall population, nearly 7 times higher than the rate among whites.
Pesado demasiado. He trabajado noche y día para mantener y sobrevivir mis hijos, gracias a mi Dios.
Like clockwork, a hungry drove of loyal regulars craving fresh-cut mangoes forms around Maria's cart. Their conversations periodically interrupted by loud metro buses.
Hay mango y sandía.
Around here, Maria's known as the abuela of Columbia Heights. She says the once lively streets have become akin to a ghost town.
Es importante este trabajo porque con esto he sobrevivido. Porque inventé yo, dije yo, Dios mío, ¿cómo hago para sobrevivir? Vaya más.
This is backbreaking work, just to make ends meet. Through cold, dark mornings and hot summer months, they stay up all night and wake up at the crack of dawn to nourish the neighborhood. The journey is still harder for undocumented immigrants like Hector.
Estados Unidos también es una nación de oportunidades y que migrantes como yo que vengo de allá de Latinoamérica venimos con un objetivo de de echar adelante, de ayudar a nuestros padres, a nuestra familia, y siempre tuvimos la esperanza de llegar un día a Norteamérica, y aquí estamos.
He's just one of many workers in this informal economy who are especially vulnerable. Without a Social Security card, Hector is ineligible for federal programs like the Paycheck Protection Program for businesses or individual stimulus checks.
Street vendors are the smallest businesses you can find in New York City. The real picture of what American dream should look like.
Mohammed Atia represents the food cart workers in New York City through the Urban Justice Center's Street Vendor Project.
If you are one of those businesses that are, pushing forward during the pandemic, how do you stay afloat?
That's the problem. A lot of people had to work only a few days a week, not the whole days that it used to be. A lot of people had to let some workers and partners go. A lot of people even start looking for other jobs just because vending wasn't really helpful to them anymore.
The group lobbies for nearly 20,000 mostly immigrant vendors who sell food, clothes, and just about everything else in New York. But the pandemic has battered small businesses in the city, and among those struggling are the vendors that have lost their number one commodity, foot traffic.
Here today because it's been more than 300 days with $0 in government support.
The Street Vendors Project is calling for emergency relief for all workers. So Morgan Stanley and the Robin Hood Foundation have partnered with the Street Vendors Project to distribute more than $2 million to thousands of vendors in New York. And with cities like D.C. emerging from pandemic lockdowns, street vending will play a critical role in getting America going again.
How has this little community, evolved during this pandemic?
Everybody needs something. There's no job. Well, they got to survive. So everybody starts coming, setting their table.
Alex Crochet, ABC News, Washington.
And now to the rise in robocalls. An estimated 4.9 billion were reportedly made in March alone. Now the FCC says it's working to track down and crack down on scammers behind many of these calls. Ariel Reshef has that story.
We recently noticed your car's extended warranty was going to expire.
Robocalls. They seem endless these days. In some cases, scammers preying on unsuspecting victims.
I'd like to congratulate you on your $1,000 instant rebate.
Those unwanted calls, the #1 complaint to the FCC, an average of 200,000 annually. And right now, the most popular category of robocalls, auto warranties. A lot of these seem to be focusing on auto warranties. Why is that?
There's public information out there about your cars that you own, and people are driving more than ever as we come out of this pandemic. So the time is ripe for fraud associated with these kind of things.
And the FCC is taking action, making changes so operators can block robocalls.
We're going to put in place new technologies that help authenticate our calls. And those new technologies will be in place in just a few months.
But the FCC says there are some things you can do now to stop most of the unwanted calls, like downloading a call blocker. YouMail is a free third-party app that helps prevent spam calls.
The pandemic actually reduced the number of robocalls dramatically. That's because the call centers had to close or operate at reduced capacity, and now they've sprung right back to where they were before the pandemic. And the whole point of a robocall is to get you to press 1 or call someone back so they can pitch you on whatever it is they're trying to sell.
This chart shows the volumes of the highest car warranty scam calls.
Using charts like this one, YouMail tracks the amount of robocalls happening at any given time, but also the many fraudulent services being offered, which they say make up nearly half of all robocalls.
There are up to 30 of them going at the same time.
What's your message to scammers out there who may be watching this?
You're going to stop because we're coming for you.
Our thanks to Ariel Reshef. Up next, to the remarkable story of a college basketball bench warmer who became a billionaire. The leadership lessons he says he learned from his coaches helped make it happen. Will Reeve has the story about how learning about teamwork made one man wildly successful. And now he's giving back.
When Matt Ishbia first walked on the court for the Michigan State basketball team, he was not a star.
I had to be the hardest working player to be the worst player on the team.
Now, nearly 2 decades later, the next time he steps on the floor, he'll have paid for it.
So I was able to give $32 million to Michigan State and really make an impact on all student athletes, basketball, football, because they got me here.
Ishbia, a literal walk-on who had to try out to make the Spartans from 1998 to 2003, winning a national championship in 2000, left Michigan State, working his way up to CEO of United Wholesale Mortgage, one of the nation's top lenders, himself amassing an estimated $9 billion personal fortune.
What do basketball and mortgages have to do with each other?
You know, funny thing is everything. I would tell you everything, because it's not about basketball or mortgages or paint. It's about leadership and teamwork and people.
Do you think you would be where you are now if not for the experiences you had at Michigan State basketball?
Absolutely not. No, Michigan State basketball put me in this position. When you do something great and you're able to be in a great position, you got to thank the people that helped you get there.
That $32 million donation, the largest individual contribution in the university's history. Ishbia insisted that the court, site of so many lessons learned that he now applies to his business career, be named after the legendary Spartan coach Tom Izzo.
It's the Tom Izzo court. He earned it. He deserved it. It's not about me. It's about him. And that's what I wanted to honor him with.
Our thanks to Will Reeve. And when we come back, defying gravity, meet the extreme athlete who created an incredible competition.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
This is Ginger Z, and if you love the Oscars, or if you're just curious about all that hype, well, then you're gonna love this. Inside the Oscars, the podcast, counting down to Hollywood's biggest night. Listen now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
The road to Oscar goes through GMA. The anticipation, the nominees, including this nominated grandmother who stole the show in Britain. What will Hollywood's biggest night look like this year? And the fashion? Next week, get your Oscar on with ABC's Good Morning America. Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
Somewhere out in the country, there's a man.
I'm Bobby.
Doing good things for good people. He'll walk a mile in their shoes, then get them a brand spanking new pair when he's done.
Just wanted you to have this.
Thank you.
You name it, he'll try. Even if it breaks him.
Bobby Bones, they're trying to break you.
Oh, great.
Breaking Bobby Bones. New series Monday, May 31st at 10 on National Geographic.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
You know, for snowboarders, it's all about who can catch the biggest air or pull off the best trick. But a new event is adding a component long forgotten to most: nature. Kaylee Hartung has more.
This is a helmet cam view from Sage Kotzenberg, one of America's elite snowboarders. Don't worry, he's not lost. He's taking part in an event that has captivated the snowboarding world.
We called it the natural selection.
Going up there into one of the main chutes. Country snowboarder's dream come true. Here we see Nico enter with a stalefish and comboing that with a huge method air.
What makes it unique, all we're doing is mimicking the incredible things that we find in the wilderness, in the mountains, and backcountry.
Travis Rice is the founder of the Natural Selection Tour, a series of downhill freestyle races featuring gravity-defying jumps, insane midair tricks, wow, and one other thing.
Mother Nature is the main character, and while the snowboarding itself is the tentpole of our event, being able to up-level the conversation being had in action sports and adventure sports around our relationship with Mother Nature, the outdoors, each other, sustainability, responsibility. All of these are things that could be better put into conversation.
It's a relationship Rice was born into. The Jackson Hole, Wyoming native learned to ski shortly after he could walk, thanks to his parents.
I think my mom put me on skis before I was 2. My dad was a ski patroller here at Jackson Hole Mountain Resort. And so, I spent quite a lot of time in the mountains and grateful for the time.
When he was 12, he discovered snowboarding.
The minute that I actually felt a turn and connected one turn into another, I think, honestly, that's kind of where it clicked for me.
In 2001, at just 18 years old, he caught the eyes of a film producer and traveled to Alaska to shoot his first movie, Transcendence. He then went on to star at ESPN's X Games, winning 2 gold medals and cementing his place as one of the best.
Switch stand 720 double grab.
But when he's not filming or competing, he's always looking for that next adventure. So in 2006, Rice had an idea.
We kind of had conversations, myself and a few friends of mine here in Jackson, about what something like what later became the Natural Selection, what it would look like. Best riders from around the world came, and I think the overall sentiments from most of the riders were like, hey, this was like the best event ever. It was so nice to change it up. But, we also learned a lot. I learned a lot from that event.
What started as a one-off event in 2008 soon blossomed into a 3-event, 2-country tour featuring some of the best snowboarders in the world. But they have to be ready for anything.
The beauty of this event is that there ain't no practice runs. It really draws upon the life experience of the rider. I mean, literally, urban street riding transitions, half pipe, slope style, jumping, tricks, riding POW, being able to know how to draw a line in the backcountry. All of these are a little bit different skill sets. And I think ultimately the riders that excel the most at this event are the ones who are probably the most well-rounded.
And the reaction from his friends and peers has been overwhelming.
Frankly, they're part of our ideation. Truly, I mean, it's from hundreds of conversations with riders that I look up to and respect around the world that this thing has shaped itself into what it is today.
Kaylee Hartung, ABC News, Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah, Robin.
Wow. And before we go tonight, our image of the day. A queen and her prince enjoying their day in the Scottish countryside near one of their homes. This has been described by some royal observers as their happy place. The couple was married for 7 decades, and tomorrow, Britain's Queen Elizabeth will say farewell to him. All of this will play out on ABC News Live starting at 9:30 Eastern. And that's our show for this hour. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Juju Chang. Thanks for streaming with us.